And then she told me, she said, watch out for the wolves in Hollywood, honey. And I said, well, I've been in British films for 3 years. I can handle wolves. And she said, well, not the power buses, honey. And she said, if they don't get what they want, they'll drop your contract. They've done.
Who said Hollywood's golden age was all about fame and money? Countless of its stars had dark and tragic stories that rival horror noir films. Get ready to unlearn everything you thought you knew about the icons of classic cinema as we uncover the top 10 tragic real-life stories of Hollywood's golden age.
Bye, my lady.
Robin!
Yes? Then you do love me, don't you? Don't you?
You know I do.
Well, that's different.
Number 10. The tragic life story of Olivia de Havilland. Actors today enjoy an unprecedented level of creative freedom. They can choose their roles that resonate with them, negotiate terms, and walk away from projects without fear. But Hollywood wasn't always so forgiving. In its golden age, star autonomy was a pipe dream. But just how far did the studios go to maintain control? Back in the day, actors were bound by strict contracts and held closely by menacing studios. Failure to fall in line almost always led to blacklisting, and no one knows better than Olivia de Havilland. Rising to fame through her stellar role in Gone with the Wind, Olivia de Havilland was one of the industry's brightest assets. She had been under contract with Warner Brothers since 1935 and featured in several A-list smash hits. Yet, it all came crashing down. At first, fans were stunned. No one could understand why Olivia de Havilland, once Hollywood's very own Duchess, was effectively cut away from the industry. However, all of our questions were answered in an interview years later. Expressing frustration with the roles she was offered, de Havilland described them as mere placeholders meant to fulfill the stereotypical function of the girl. And she wanted more, much more. Determined to pursue more meaningful parts, she began rejecting the roles assigned to her, a defiance that was completely unheard of during the 1930s and 1940s, much to the chagrin of studio executives. Warner Brothers responded with a venomous attack. They suspended her without pay and shut her out of the industry. This came at the peak of her career when she was still under the age of 30. So yes, de Havilland's decision to stand by her principles cost her significant money, fame, and influence. Worse, Warner Brothers executives spread the word to other studios not to give her employment because of her, difficult attitude. They wanted her to suffer all because she wanted a tiny amount of choice to play roles that resonated with her. However, de Havilland was determined. She also knew that the system was unjust. Not being able to refuse a role stood against everything Olivia de Havilland believed to be fair, so she decided to fight back. Drawing on the legal expertise of her attorney father, she took Warner Brothers to court, and after a long legal battle, she eventually won. In 1943, her victory led to the implementation of Labor Code Section 2855, commonly known as the de Havilland Law. As de Havilland's biographer puts it, the court victory was a major brick in the downfall of the control of the studio system. Actors were no longer forced to work in studios forever, and they could finally turn down roles they didn't want to partake in. But don't take this to mean life suddenly became easy for Hollywood stars, though. Our next Golden Age actor proved this. Number 9. The Life and Times of Frances Farmer. Born in Seattle, Washington, Frances Farmer found her flair for theater as a college student and even moved to New York City to pursue a stage career. However, her talent caught the eye of Paramount Pictures, which signed her to a contract and cast her debut in the 1936 film Too Many Parents. Gaining appraisal, she racked up a couple more roles, including Come and Get It, for which she earned critical acclaim. Then, suddenly, her entire world came crashing down. Her bright star was eclipsed by erratic behavior fueled by alcoholism and declining mental health. In fact, much of her adult life was spent shuffling between institutions and living with family members. But what exactly happened? After a couple of dances with the law, including DUIs, driving without a license, probation, and an inability to pay fines, Farmer was inches close to jail time. She avoided this through the efforts of her sister-in-law, a deputy sheriff in Los Angeles County, and was instead transferred to a psychiatric ward. There, she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after an earlier diagnosis of manic depressive psychosis. With help from the Screen Actors Guild, she was transferred to the Kimball Sanitarium in the San Fernando Valley, where she underwent insulin shock therapy, a common psychiatric treatment at the time that caused severe nausea as a side effect. Now, this was a terrible time for the young actress. Apart from the drawbacks of being institutionalized and shock therapy, Farmer recounted multiple instances of abuse and SA in the facility. She later experienced a bit of a resurgence in the late 1950s and early 1960s with some TV and stage appearances, but even that didn't last long. Her career was a shadow of what it once was, and in the spring of 1970, she was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, which was attributed to a life of heavy smoking. She later died in August of that year, age 56. But while it was a devastating conclusion for the once great actress, the events that followed revealed exactly how horrible her life had become. Farmer's posthumously released autobiography, Will There Really Be a Morning?, described harsh captivity straight out of a horror movie. In the book, Farmer said she had been brutalized and tortured in a variety of ways. Some of the claims included being forced to eat her own feces and act as a plaything for male doctors and orderlies. Like a prisoner, Farmer claimed she was chained in padded cells, strapped into straitjackets, and half drowned in ice baths. She was even gnawed on by rats and poisoned by tainted food. In 1978, Seattle film critic William Arnold's Shadowland claimed Frances Farmer had undergone a transorbital lobotomy. However, her family, former lovers, and ex-husbands either denied or failed to confirm the allegation. Farmer's sister, Edith, stated the hospital sought their parents' consent for the procedure, but her father was appalled and threatened legal action to prevent it. Fortunately, Frances has not been buried under the sands of time. Her tragic life is memorialized in the 1982 Oscar-nominated film Frances, as well as the Nirvana song by Kurt Cobain. Named Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle, the song is a somber homage to a life full of needless suffering. Speaking of which, here's another gutting story.
I sat home all day looking at bracelets. Ha! Of all the dumb bunnies. What do you think I'm doing while you're out pulling your dirty deals? Waiting for Daddy to come home?
Number 8. Jean Harlow's declining health. What we'd give to go back to the golden age, to see Jean Harlow once again in all her glory. Guys, there's a reason why the American Film Institute ranked Harlow number 22 on its greatest female screen legends list. Famous for playing bad girl characters, Jean Harlow was the leading sex symbol of the early 1930s. She also formulated the idea that blondes have more fun. She embodied a sultry, carefree attitude, often associated with a femme fatale image that no one could get enough of. In fact, Harlow's influence extended to icons like Marilyn Monroe, Madonna, and much more. For a time, Harlow was the biggest star in Hollywood, and not just for women. She was the biggest name in the entire industry. She had hit after hit, and her name alone was enough to fill out an entire cinema. Then, in 1937, her health took a devastating turn. She had been somewhat unwell for months, but while filming Saratoga, the actress complained of nausea, bloating, and stomach discomfort. It was so bad that she relied on her co-star and friend Clark Gable between takes. But when they discovered the truth, it was already too late. Jean Harlow took time off work to recover from what doctors now diagnosed as an inflamed gallbladder. But when Clark Gable visited her, he was devastated to find her severely bloated and emitting a strange odor, later identified as a symptom of advanced kidney failure. And no, it wasn't getting any better. But guess what? Despite her deteriorating health, Harlow was forced to tirelessly work on set just to satisfy her demanding studio bosses. She even attended the 1936 Oscars while gravely ill, so much so that actress Carole Lombard had to assist with her makeup in the powder room. The warning signs were there for all to witness, but no one cared to see. Harlow's pale complexion, frequent illnesses, and even a severe sunburn earlier in her life all hinted at kidney failure. Yet the severity of her condition went under the radar. By the time the industry began to care, the cold hands of death were already knocking on Harlow's door. She was admitted to a hospital on June 6, 1937, and fell into a coma that very night. She was gone before the rise of the sun at just 26 years old. In her final days, Harlow had been reading Gone with the Wind. She even brought it with her to the hospital, prompting a nurse to sadly remark, "She'll never finish it." Sadly, she was right. Harlow died, and alone. But hey, the heartbreak doesn't stop there. Up next is Barbara Payton, another blonde bombshell whose personal struggles led to a downward spiral that effectively destroyed her life and career. Number 7. Barbara Payton's debauchery. Make no mistake, guys, Barbara Payton's life is a harrowing reveal of both the allure and dangers of fame. Never shy about using her animal magnetism to get her way, the actress often used her looks and charm to gain opportunities. She once went on a date with a producer and asked him for a role, but his reply was downright brutal. He claimed to have no available openings, but would gladly pay for a night together. Desperate for quick cash, Payton accepted his offer. She told herself it was a one-time thing, but instead it marked the beginning of her descent into exploitation and despair. One night, an official who owed Payton a favor met with her to deliver grim news. A raid on Fortune's properties was imminent. Fearing the fallout, she scrambled to make quick money by sleeping with several men and used the funds to flee back to Hollywood. But once she got to Los Angeles, Payton realized a harsh truth. No one in the industry had worked for her or showed any interest in her talent. Instead, she received degrading offers from those seeking to exploit her. With no other options, she reluctantly accepted. Sadly, her declining fame meant she earned less, which plunged her further into a spiral of despair. Worse, her tumultuous relationships didn't help either. After a love triangle involving actors Francois Tone and Tom Neal ended in a violent altercation, Payton was effectively blacklisted from the industry. Financial troubles pushed her into sex work, and though she tried to maintain a facade of control, her dependency on alcohol and drugs consumed her. By the 1960s, her once gilded life had collapsed. Living in squalor on Sunset Boulevard, she relied on selling poetry for meager sums while struggling with deteriorating health. Year after year, her binge drinking spiraled out of control, leading to shocking incidents like sleeping near a dumpster on Sunset Boulevard and frequent run-ins with the law. Though she was offered a spot in a detox program, Payton refused, insisting she'd rather drink her life away. When the social worker left off Payton with her parents, their reaction was terrifying. Instead of helping her get back on track, her parents encouraged her to fall from grace. The three of them regularly participated in long drinking binges that only made Payton's condition worse. Payton eventually passed away from heart and liver failure on the 8th of May, 1967, at just 39 years old. We'll never know the heights she could have reached in the industry because fame and her demons snuffed her life away, piece by piece, year after year. If only she had an anchor, a compass, or a beacon of hope to set her on the right path.
Why don't you let me drive you home? I don't have to be back till tomorrow.
You dirty gringos! You're no good! None of you!
Number 6. The story of Natalie Wood. When fate came for Natalie Wood on November 29, 1981, Hollywood was left in a somber state. The actress's career was on the ascendancy, and she was, in fact, in the middle of filming Brainstorm when tragedy struck. She, her husband Wagner, and her co-star Christopher Walken decided to take a weekend boat trip on Wagner's yacht, Splendor. They had a great time, had fun, had some drinks, and had a mini party on November 28th. Everything seemed normal, at least until the following morning. Natalie Wood was nowhere to be found. The only lead authorities had was a word-of-mouth testimony from Wagner, who claimed that she wasn't on the yacht when he had gone to bed. With time blitzing away without a word from the actress, Natalie Wood was officially declared missing. The police frantically searched for her whereabouts or any leads until they finally found her, or at least her body. She drowned to death a mile away from the boat. An inflatable dinghy was found nearby, but initial evidence at the scene offered little clarity about the tragedy. But as soon as the investigation progressed, more unsettling details emerged. Wood's autopsy revealed a blood alcohol level of 0.14%, exceeding the legal driving limit, along with traces of motion sickness and pain relief medication. Given the latter may have amplified the effects of the alcohol, speculations arose that Wood, under the influence, might have attempted to use the dinghy and accidentally fallen overboard, leading to her death. But here's where things get interesting. From the very beginning, Wood's sister Lana was dissatisfied with this conclusion. She believed it untrue and felt there was more to the story than meets the eye. Would you blame her? Wood, according to her account, was terrified of water and couldn't even swim. If so, there was absolutely no reason why she would try to be near water or get into the dinghy by herself. More disturbingly, 2 witnesses close to the yacht claimed to have heard a woman screaming for help at the time of Wood's passing. Sadly, it wasn't enough to turn the tide. Wood's death was said to be accidental, and the case was closed. Until 2011, nearly 2 decades after the actress's death. The yacht's captain, Dennis DeVerne, confessed a shocking secret. He misled investigators by hiding critical details about the night of her death. He revealed that on the eve of her death, Wood and her husband, Robert Wagner, had engaged in a heated argument sparked by Wagner's jealousy over her alleged flirting with Christopher Walken. Think that's crazy? Here's another bombshell. In the hours after Wood's disappearance, Wagner forbade Captain DeVerne from turning on the searchlights to look for his lost wife. Yes, the one man who should have been frantically searching for his wife was not only lackadaisical about it, but also hindered the search. He believed Wagner knew what truly transpired and was even responsible for her death. Though authorities first ruled Wood's passing as an accidental drowning, Captain DeVerne's shocking reveal made it switch to drowning and other undetermined factors. In 2018, Robert Wagner was officially named a person of interest in the investigation. It may be all the closure fan and mourners of Natalie Wood will ever get. In any case, the story of Natalie Wood and her mysterious death paints an eerie side of Hollywood, one where its leading men never get the recognition they deserve because of their tragic ends. Think Wood is a devastating example? You've seen nothing yet. Number 5. Behind the scenes, Munster Family. Carolyn Jones will always be celebrated for her iconic portrayal of Morticia Addams in the 1964 version of The Addams Family. But her life behind the camera is one of the most tragic stories of old Hollywood. To the outside world, Carolyn Jones was on top of the world. She delighted fans and viewers with breathtaking performances as the macabre matriarch of the Munster family. But little did we know the struggles she had away from the camera. By the late 1970s, Carolyn's stardom had faded, and she painstakingly sought opportunities to reclaim her place in the spotlight. Just as her comeback seemed within reach, tragedy struck. During a flight from Dallas to Los Angeles, Carolyn suddenly became gravely ill, to the point of vomiting troubling amounts of blood. She was rushed to the hospital as soon as she landed, where she underwent emergency surgery. A considerable part of her stomach was removed in the aftermath. Wondering what the sickness was all about? At first, Jones's harrowing ordeal was attributed to ulcers, but the reality was far more serious. The actress was diagnosed with colon cancer, a revelation she chose to keep private. Instead of sharing her condition with the public, she underwent painful surgeries and chemotherapy. She was also determined to maintain her career despite such immense challenges. Acting was everything to Miss Jones, and she was eager to get back into the industry. As soon as her cancer went into remission, Carolyn Jones joined the cast of the soap opera Capital, finding fulfillment in her work. But her relief was short-lived. Her doctors discovered that the cancer had returned, this time more aggressively. Though Carolyn Jones fought a good fight, she realized that treatments no longer worked. This time she refused to give up acting. She continued her role on Capital, often working through immense pain. At one point, she shot scenes from a wheelchair because she was too frail to stand up. Acting had always been her lifeblood, and she was determined to carry on no matter what stood in her way. Finding joy in her final months, Carolyn Jones married her partner, Peter Bailey Britton, in September 1982. The ceremony was brilliant. Carolyn adorned herself with a lace and ribbon cap to conceal her hair loss, and her castmates praised her unwavering strength and bravery. Unfortunately, fate was not so kind. By July 1983, Carolyn's condition had worsened and she slipped into a coma at her home in West Hollywood. On the 3rd of August 1983, Carolyn passed away at the age of 53. A memorial service was held 2 days later and her body was cremated. Ever thoughtful, Carolyn Jones made sure that her legacy as Morticia Addams would live on by donating her iconic costume and wig to the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences. Coming next, though, is the longest death in Hollywood history.
Enough to say the word no. Just no. 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 No, no, no.
Number 4. Montgomery Clift's long death. In the 1950s, Montgomery Clift sent the industry on fire. But most importantly, he was cut from a different stone. He introduced a raw, honest, and rebellious energy that stood in stark contrast to the polished, cookie-cutter male leads Hollywood typically churned out as symbols of post-war masculinity. But sadly, his time in the spotlight was tragically brief, and his untimely death at just 45 remains one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking tales. You see, Clift was on top of the world before life came so hard. He had a special quality only a few actors possessed, and his compelling screen presence could sweep anyone off their feet. His looks? Chef's kiss. He had a set jaw, immaculate eyes, and a sort of aura we haven't seen since. He played the desperate, the drunken, and the deceived, and the trajectory of his life was as tragic as that in any of his films. When the press talked about Clift, they talked about his talent and looks, but also what a strange, totally unique man he was. Living in a modest $10 a month apartment, Montgomery Clift kept life simple, surviving on a diet of steak, eggs, and orange juice. He hated nightclubs, preferring to spend his free time immersed in the works of Chekhov, Aristotle, and classic text on history and economics. He didn't even care when his friends described his abode as beat up. It was terrific in his eyes and just enough for him. Unsurprisingly, Clift's private life was boring. Though he had exceptional looks, he never flirted nor dated. He didn't even hang out in public. His image was, more than anything else, confusing, yet so amazing. Then, in 1956, Clift's world fell flat. While shooting the Western war drama Raintree County, Clift suffered a severe car accident that left his face badly injured. His condition was so bad that even doctors were amazed he survived. Following this incident, Clift withdrew from the public eye and was hardly seen out of his home, save for the hospital visits for extensive surgery. Alas, Clift never truly recovered. He was in a tremendous amount of pain throughout the years that followed the accident, leading to a life of binge drinking as a coping mechanism. He passed away from a heart attack in a New York City hospital in 1966. Those close to him admitted that Clift drank himself to death. It's an incredibly sad ending to the life of a breathtaking actor and human being. Before we go into the last 3 tragic tales, consider using a second of your time to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications. It'll keep you up to date with all the channel's activities and ensure you don't miss out on other amazing videos like this one. Already subscribed? Excellent. Grab a tissue for who's next. Number 3. Hollywood's Sign Girl. Standing 45 feet tall above the hills of Los Angeles, the iconic 9 white letters spelling Hollywood have become one of the world's most famous cultural symbols. Up to 10 million people flock around just to see it annually. But apart from being a big tourist destination, the hills meant much more to aspiring stars. It's a reminder of the city's rich history and a symbol of hope for their own potential success. But what if I told you there's a dark side to the Hollywood sign as well? Back in 1932, a young, ambitious actress named Peg Entwistle left her uncle's home, walked to the nearby Hollywood sign, climbed a maintenance ladder to the top of the letter H, and jumped to her death. She was only 24 years old. But why? What exactly drove her to abruptly end her career and life in such a devastating way? You see, Peg was the youngest actress to be recruited by the New York Theater Guild. She worked as an actress on Broadway, and a healthy number of her plays were well received. She also married actor Robert Keith in 1927, though their relationship was as tumultuous as it was short-lived. Peg filed for divorce just 2 years later, citing abuse and domestic cruelty. After achieving success on Broadway, Peg moved to Los Angeles, where she co-starred with Billy Burke and Humphrey Bogart in a stage production of The Mad Hopes. The play was a success and scored her a screen test for the movie 13 Women. While waiting for her big break, the promising Peg moved back in with her uncle on Beechwood Drive, whiskers away from the Hollywood sign. Finally getting the plot? There's more. Contrary to what many would have expected, Peg struggled to stand out or land roles during her first summer in LA. The worst year of the Great Depression didn't help, and Peg was too broke to return to New York City. The only appearance she made in a movie was a supporting role in 13 Women, which flopped, and many of her scenes were cut due to censorship. On the 18th of September 1932, a woman hiking below the Hollywood sign discovered a shoe, purse, and jacket. Upon opening the purse, she found a note and, looking down the mountain, spotted a body below. She reported the findings to the Los Angeles police and placed the items on the steps of the Hollywood police station. Peg was unidentifiable until her uncle, with whom she had been living on Beechwood Canyon, recognized her from the description and the initials P.E. on the note, which had been published in the newspapers. As it turns out, Peg lied to her uncle about meeting friends. Instead, she hiked up the steep canyon hill to the Hollywood sign. Feeling down and reportedly intoxicated, she climbed up a maintenance ladder to the top of the letter H and jumped off. After her death, Peg became known as the Hollywood Sign Girl and became part of the Hollywood legend. Oddly enough, some even claim the day after Peg's death, the Beverly Hills Playhouse unknowingly offered her the lead role in a play about a woman who killed herself. Ghost stories began to surface, especially when the H of the Hollywood sign mysteriously fell, and multiple paranormal occurrences matched Peg's description, including the scent of her signature gardenia perfume. A blonde, ghostly figure dressed in 1930s clothing resembling Peg has been seen by various people, even those unaware of her tragic story. Weird, right?
Mother died, and whenever I talk about her, and I should because she was so wicked.
Number 2, Judy Garland's coming-of-age story. At the end of her life, Judy Garland should have been one of the richest women in the industry. She was a teenage star and had the industry in a chokehold when she starred in The Wizard of Oz, one of the most iconic and successful movies of all time. But walking through fame, especially at such a young age, was more than she could handle. By the time Garland was in her 40s, she was nearly homeless, owed thousands in back taxes to the IRS, and survived on $100 a night singing in bars. She was everything no one expected, a shadow of her former self. Born in 1922, Judy Garland was a performer from the start. Her first stage performance came before she clocked 3, and her parents were vaudeville performers. However, life was anything but smooth. Her father was a terrible person, and her mother, Ethel, was too eager to make her children stars. She fed Garland amphetamines in the morning and sleeping pills at night to keep her always active. Judy Garland was signed by Louis B. Mayer in 1935 when she was just 13. Her 7-year contract secured her a weekly salary of $100, a significant amount during the Great Depression. However, her time at MGM began on a dark page. Often typecast as the girl next door, Garland was put through a grueling schedule where she was frequently working on 2 or 3 films simultaneously. Her day began with 3 hours of school, followed by singing rehearsals, and then hours of shooting, sometimes lasting until 5 a.m. Coping was impossible, so she relied on a diet of pills, becoming dependent on them by the age of 15. In 1939, at 16, Judy Garland landed her big break as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, a role originally intended for Shirley Temple. To make her appear younger, the studio put her on a strict diet of chicken soup, black coffee, 80 cigarettes, diet pills, and amphetamines. Her waist was tightly corseted, and prosthetics were used to alter her nose. Worse, the iconic image of Dorothy haunted Garland throughout her career. Many people were said to be pretty angry with Garland whenever she wasn't putting on braids, dressing like Dorothy, or not acting 11 or 12. At 19, Garland was expecting a baby, but she was forced to have an abortion by the studios and her own mother. A child, they said, would ruin her image as an ingenue, and Ethel again desperately wanted her child to be a star. To make things worse, Garland was harassed by some of Hollywood's most powerful men, including Mayer, who was obsessed with Garland. These men made life miserable for the actresses, who were way too young and innocent to face such disgusting, despicable acts from those who should have been their mentors. Her relationship life wasn't any better. Garland was married 5 times, and her last husband, Mickey Deans, was pumping stimulants into her. They were married only 3 months before she died of an accidental barbiturate overdose because Deans was feeding her all of the nasty pills she wanted. She was only 46. Looking back, Garland's life is one, if not the most, tragic coming-of-age stories in Hollywood. She was surrounded by terrible people, executives, and family. Having good people around would have easily changed her story, but hey, if only wishes were horses. Number 1. The Fatty Arbuckle Trials. Who would have thought all it took to alter the image of the silent film era was a scandal involving one of its biggest stars? Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, for all of his flaws, was one of the most beloved faces in the industry. Everyone loved his sense of humor and quirky persona, yet he was at the center of a scandal so shocking that it left the entire industry reeling. But what really happened? Was Arbuckle the victim of a conspiracy, or was there something far darker at play? To answer the burning questions, we'd have to go way back to the summer of 1921. His latest comedy, Crazy to Marry, was playing to packed theaters nationwide, and Paramount Pictures had just signed him to an extraordinary $3 million contract over 3 years, with plans for him to star in 18 silent films. It was a call for celebration, and Arbuckle's friend, Fred Fishback, organized a lavish 3-day Labor Day party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco to commemorate the actor. Fast forward to the end of the week, and Arbuckle was locked up in cell number 12 on Felony Row at the San Francisco Hall of Justice, held without bail, and accused of killing 25-year-old actress Virginia Rappe. But did he really do it? On September 5th, 1921, Arbuckle was hosting a lavish party graced by various guests, including Virginia Rappe. With one too many drinks in her system, the actress fell ill in Arbuckle's hotel room. She was taken to a hospital where she ultimately died from peritonitis caused by a ruptured bladder. The worst was yet to come. When rumors circulated that Arbuckle had assaulted a weekend Rappe, sensationalist tabloids seized on the story, fueled it with lies, vilified the actor, and provoked public outrage. He was seen as a monster, a villain in the eyes of the public, so no matter how hard Arbuckle tried, nothing could be done to calm the storm. He was later charged with molestation and manslaughter, and it took 3 trials to exonerate him. The first 2 trials of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle ended in hung juries with no clear verdict. The proceedings were controversial, with some evidence suggesting that Rappe may have had a pre-existing medical condition that could have caused her bladder to rupture. However, the media continued to portray Arbuckle as guilty, damaging his reputation. In the 3rd trial, Arbuckle was exonerated after just 6 minutes of deliberation, with the jury returning a unanimous not guilty verdict. The judge publicly stated that Arbuckle had suffered injustice due to a lack of evidence. Sadly, the damage to his career was irreparable. Under pressure from the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, Hollywood banned Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle from working in film, and copies of his movies were destroyed to prevent them from being seen. Though Arbuckle tried to rebuild his life with help from friends like Buster Keaton, who found him jobs behind the scenes as a director, the magic of his earlier career was lost. He lived in obscurity, marrying twice, and struggling to regain his footing. In 1932, Arbuckle briefly signed with Warner Brothers, but he died months later of a heart attack at 46. The Fatty Arbuckle scandal remains one of Hollywood's most shocking moments, not just for the tragedy that occurred, but for the way it showed the darker side of fame. It was one of the first eye-openers to how Hollywood and the media could discard anyone once they became expendable. After Arbuckle's trial and acquittal, Universal became the first studio to include morality clauses in actors' contracts. This allowed them to terminate or punish actors whose behavior was deemed immoral or scandalous. While these clauses seemed like a good idea on paper, they led to numerous issues for the actors. The strict control over their careers and personal lives created an environment vulnerable to exploitation. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through 10 of the most tragic real-life stories from Hollywood's golden age. Despite the fame and acclaim enjoyed by these stars, they all had heartbreaking and tragic ends. Did we miss even worse stories from this era? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out the video on your screen for more unforgettable Hollywood stories. See you in the next one.